Media Mayhem, thank you for tuning in, and I'm just going to take a look at this 200 greatest hip-hop albums of all time list created by the what looks to be editorial team over at Rolling Stone. And a few notes before this. Top lists, specifically those curated by these publications, often have controversial picks within them, purposefully put there to generate clicks, get people talking, and generate a discourse around their piece, but also around hip-hop music, essentially making them synonymous in the algorithm. So it leads a lot of people to their site. That's what it's done today and yesterday on social media, particularly Twitter and TikTok, where I've seen countless people complaining mainly about one choice, and that being Cardi B's invasion of privacy. And while I'll get there, I want to take a look at all 200 and just stop when I have something to say, a piece of insight to give, and just overall nuance to provide around why these decisions are made and what, I think they should be based on. Because what I think this list lacks from just the small browsing I've done at it is a consistent basis on what makes a song or an album great. So let's get into it. I think they gave a really great intro, wrote a fantastic intro here that essentially defends their choices before they're even making them, which, as a journalist, I just think is a bad decision. Essentially telling your audience, we know you're going to be upset, but please bear with us. I think just get them right into it. But the important part of this here is saying, quote, at the bottom, as we dug and listened, we found ourselves a little less swayed by the golden age mystique than we might have been had we done this list 10 or 15 years ago. And that's a fantastic thing to not only point out, but show that, now the editorial team, the people that are doing this, they're young. Or at least they are giving off the impression that they're young. But, with all of that being said and their sort of little input here, essentially defending their picks, let's get into it. And number 200 is Travis Scott's Astroworld. And this is something else where I thought the description of it was odd, because what's first mentioned is the context now of the Astroworld tragedy. So that tells me right off the bat that I should be taking this list in consideration of the context of the contemporary right now. And then they go on to say that, he incorporated a lot of sounds and there's a lot of innovations here and we won't be able to appreciate it the same way again. I agree with all of that. But why is it 200 on your list? I don't think Astroworld has influenced any sort of artist or album in a very obvious or, I think, even discreet way. I think it's a great piece of work and a lot of people loved it, but it's not even Travis Scott's best album. And I think a lot of people agree with that. I think people are on the side of Birds. People are on the side of Rodeo. I'm on the side of Rodeo. But kicking this list off with something so almost painstakingly contemporary is a strange choice. And that leads us to 199, which is Juice WRLD's Goodbye and Good Riddance. I was making the argument with a friend about this, that this album didn't matter. It was the singles packed within it. And those being All Girls Are the Same and Lucid Dreams. Again, this just feels like a cop-out. They're saying these songs were so important to the culture of music and influence moving forward, which, All Girls Are the Same and Lucid Dreams are the blueprint for emo trap as we know it today. And a lot of people that have come past that and sort of altered their sound a little bit to resemble the space that Juice WRLD, the void that he has left. And I think people like Trippie Redd are doing that. We hear a lot of people auto-crooning their voices more towards this melodic trap sound now. But picking it as an album to put on here, again, is just confusing to me because the album itself wasn't special. The singles within it were. So if you're picking best rap song, sure, put them on there. And again, I'm just going to stop when I have something important to say or want to point something out. Freddie Gibbs absolutely belongs on this list. I hope to see him again because I would definitely choose a couple albums over Bandana, particularly Alfredo. Yeah, just and there's some choices where it's like I don't have the contextual reference point to essentially emphasize whether it belongs on the list or not. So the Jacka Tear Gas, I'm not too familiar with that at all, so I don't really have much to say about it. And then we have somebody like Cupcake, who I appreciate them for putting them on this list, because Cupcake's music is another thing where it's like it has been memeified to hell and back, in the ways of a lot of people know Cupcake songs and verses, but they don't know who Cupcake is. So I really like the fact they put them on there, especially their outward support for LGBTQ plus communities, and kind of the shockwave that I think Cupcake's music had in the specific hip hop scene that it was already in. I'm glad they chose Rocky's best album to put on here. A little low considering how outright influenced and in turn influential Long Live ASAP, Live Love ASAP was. Even though they have Long Live ASAP written here. Interesting. You may want to editorialize that, Rolling Stones. But, his first debut mixtape, this one, is an outstanding piece of work, and I think has tracks like they listed, Peso and Purple Swag, that, were not only fusions of the Houston, SoundCloud, and New York scenes, but something that came to take over, I think, the industry, and somebody who I think that, Travis Scott, I think took what A$AP Rocky had in terms of relevance and trajectory. And I think this album is a perfect example of that. Pop Smoke makes sense. Again, I think it's the songs on here rather than the mixtape itself that's really important. And that is going to be a pet peeve of mine with this list. I can just guarantee it right now. Drake You're the Ruler, good choice. Old Nipsey Hussle. Saba Care For Me is an interesting choice to put on here, because as somebody from Chicago, or somebody from the Chicago suburbs that lived in Chicago and is moving back very soon, I'd always been around Saba and knew he was very big in Chicago, and that was my reference point. And my only other one besides that was like the Twitter sphere and what people think of them on there, on hip hop Twitter. But yeah, Saba, it's great to see him on this list. That's for sure. Let's see here. Little Sims, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert is another good choice. Gotta have E40. I think there's better West Side Gun tapes to pick personally, but I think this was the one that I think introduced people to who and what he is. Absolute classic cover right here. Interesting Mac Miller choice, and I say that because I don't think this is even close to his best album. This was easily one of his more experimental and decidedly laid back ones from a stylistic point of view. So interesting choice. And same with, Flo Milli at 172. I just don't think enough time has passed for us to look at this as anything but, they put it right here, TikTok mega hit. And I feel like that's where a lot of the popularity from Flo Milli has come. I think she's immensely talented. I think that she deserves a lot of the accolades she has coming to her, but greatest hip hop albums of all time, we do not have the perspective on this necessary, considering it came out less than 2 years ago. But, I'm not knocking her style or anything like that at all. But if we scroll up, like just even like a little bit, we can see albums that I think rank just slightly above that. But let's keep moving here. So, gotta throw him on at least once. Another really new album that I'm surprised to see. Again, a great one, but again, has enough time passed for us to really state that this belongs in the history books. This is not something we are going to hear again, and this is something that, stands on its own. I think it is, but it says something, and it's kind of brash putting it this high on a list. In terms of influence, absolutely belongs on there. I'm happy to see him here. It's not loading, but Schoolboy Q Blank Face is a good album, but I'm just so shocked that it's as high as it is, especially considering that, and this might be why it is at the spot it's at, is that we haven't heard anything close to this quality from Schoolboy Q since 2016. So maybe they think that this was it for him. And granted, that part completely reigned over 2016, a little bit into 2017, if I'm not mistaken. It's a great album. This great? I don't know. Interesting choice. The 15 minutes. So they basically put an EP on here too. Interesting tier whack choice. I'm not a big Polo G fan personally, but to outright say, you know, this belongs on the top list. Like if I don't see, you know, Finally Rich or even Alfredo Sant, like we have to put the people that set the blueprint for people like Polo G ahead of him. So I'm really hoping that we see some Chicago legends on the list above him, because again, this album spawned some fantastic and popular singles. But does that mean the album's going to be remembered? And that's my issue consistently with a lot of this year. Shout out Big L. Great Danny Brown album. I'm super happy that they chose this, because this was a really, really eccentric album for when it came out, in the way that it mixed a lot of pop influences with hip hop, but doesn't sound dated even when you listen to it today. Very happy to see Danny Brown on here with Triple X, even though I think Atrocity Exhibition is the album that I would choose to put on this list, but we might see it above, even though in the intro they did state that, you know, I think they're trying to keep it one artist, which I understand. But also, if you're ranking the top 200 greatest rap albums, does it matter which artist it is? In which case we'd see a lot of Kanye, Tupac, etc. Ray Shremmer Shrem Life is like, this is one where I'd make the argument that I think this is an album that belongs on here, because there were a lot of, you know, singles on here that went crazy. But I remember when this album came out, people were shocked at the insane amount of just popping party songs that were just laid throughout this. And obviously we know Mike Will Made It had a lot to do with it, but this was Ray Shremmer at their biggest and their highest, and they'll never reach that height again. Going on, Montero. I think, you know, has the time passed for us to say whether this belongs here or not? Not necessarily, but considering just how monumental of a success Lil Nas X has been, and sort of on his own terms, I think warrants him a spot on this list somewhere, because, you know, not only his brash and unapologetic, you know, insurgence of sexuality into his music, and him being unafraid of showing who he is in that regard, I think it marks an important moment in pop music today, which is essentially rap now, in that Lil Nas X and people like Doja Cat are sort of the hybrid between those, where it's like, I'm not going to call them a pop star because they are a rapper. And we'll get to some more of that soon. But, you know, that's sort of my thoughts on those first 50, and just generally where I think this list is going, where hip hop is going, and sort of the blending of pop and rap is going to, I think, just not be illuminated as much as it has been, in that we're not going to recognize that a song is it pop, is it trap? It's both. And I think we're going to get there very, very soon. Odd Roots album to choose. I hope they have a different album ahead. Have to throw DJ Screw on here. Run the Jewels 2. This is my pick for my favorite Run the Jewels album, and they do belong on there somewhere. Shout out Killer Mike. You need an LL Cool J on there. They picked the right Common album, thank God. Eternal a Take. You know, I'm sort of yes and no on this, because I love this album. I think it's Uzi's best and most consistent album. And, you know, the reason I think that it belongs on this list is that it was so hyped and it delivered on that hype. And then he immediately dropped a deluxe album that kept the hype going even further. So, yeah, I completely agree and understand with him being on here. A little low. Curious to see if they rank something above it. City Girls Period is an interesting choice, because I only say that because I'm curious and worried where they're gonna put more legendary hip-hop acts before or ahead of them, because City Girls, I mean, this tape in particular did have, and I see them saying debut mixtape is the missing link between Salt and Peppa and the attack of, okay. it makes sense why it is where it's at, but was it as revolutionary as albums that's going to be above it? I don't know. But at the same time, I am not the target demographic at all for this, at all. And I'm not the one to say whether it was as influential or as common to be played in places where I'm at, which it just wasn't. And granted, I think Young Miami and JT are immensely talented, and I loved their last album they did. I don't know the name of it right now, but yeah, interesting choice. Doja Cat, too soon, I think. I mean, yeah, she's taken over in sort of a poppy way, but you know, I make the argument like Doja Cat's a rapper. I agree with people on that. And I think that, you know, this was her way of proving that with songs that may have a pop, you know, verse or pop hook, but she's rapping throughout the rest of the song. And, you know, I meant, you know, pop chorus, and then she's rapping on the hooks and the verses, which, yeah, I think she totally does that. And she is iconic now, as they say here. Great choice for Rick Ross. Very low. Very, very low. But, you know, I think they're making the point that what was revolutionary back then is not as revolutionary to our contemporary culture and the people that listen to music now. And I think we're going to see that when we see some of the top choices here. Showing more love to Killer Mike. Shout out that. Forest Hills Drive, you know, I think it deserves to be on this list. I think this is kind of, for what they've set up for themselves, at least, it's kind of low. That's what I'll say. You need Ghostface Killah. See, again, then they go back and just choose something like this, where it's like, how are you going to explain putting Tupac's Me Against the World here, and then putting something like Pete Rock and CL Smooth's album here? That's where I'm sort of confused. And they do talk about, you know, it highlighted something. There was a specific song on here that was fantastic or revolutionary, but are we talking about the songs? Or are we talking about the greater piece of work at large? Happy to see Playboi Carti on here with Whole Lotta Red. And obviously I'm going to agree that it belongs on this list somewhere because I'm a huge fan, but bigger than that, the influence that we've already seen from this album in less than 2 years has just been immense. And I think Cardi, with this album and with the, you know, tour that followed it, has showed that, you know, rap shows don't have to be this, you know, watching somebody on stage walk around and sing over an MP3. It doesn't have to be that. It can be this elusive experience where it's like, it's one big show and one big party, and Cardi's as much of a participant as you are as a crowd member. And I think that's part of what makes this special here as well. Gotta have Bone Thugs on here. Just took pictures of them at summer camp. Savage Mode. Interesting place to put it, but again, you know, this set a blueprint for not only 21 Savage and Metro Boomin, but Metro Boomin's collab tapes, 21 Savage's insane solo career. So yeah, I get it. And I know critics weren't too kind to this album when it came out, but I think it at the time was fantastic and sort of represented this murky, dark, moody space in trap that hadn't been explored with such finesse and professionalism as what Metro Boomin could bring to it. Drake's best album. I don't want to see another Drake album on here, even though I know I'm going to see Take Care because I've already seen the list before a little bit, but this is Drake's best album, full force, because it is meticulous and deliberate. And what I mean by that is I hear Drake songs now where I just feel like it's all fleeting. It's all just recollection of the great times that come with fame and fortune, where this one, it had that in there, but it was also planned out and well written and produced in a way that complemented Drake's vocals, and the sound editing in here was next and still is next level. And he also helped introduce Travis Scott to more of a mainstream crowd with this as well. It's Drake's best album. There's no doubt in my mind. I will fight that point. Speakerbox, Too Low. I love this album. It's in my top 2 outkast albums. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but yeah. Souls of Mischief belong on this list, and 93, you know, I think part of it is sort of the culture that surrounded like songs like 93 to Infinity till Infinity, where, you know, it took a lot of influences and then was further influenced upon in the future and really highlighted, like they say, that Bay Area sound. Gotta have an NERD on here. This isn't even in my like top 3 Tribe albums, so, but granted, okay, it had Can I Kick It on there, yeah, but Low End Theory's 10 times better in my opinion. Barter 6, classic. I would be upset if it wasn't on here. And by the way that they are developing this list, I think it's a little too low. That's a crazy album cover. That is a crazy album cover. I gotta listen to this. I haven't heard of it. The Coop Party Music. I'm listening to that. Tyler Creator Bastard. Come on, it's gotta be somewhere. Ooh, Missy Elliott Under Construction 2002. Again, a little low. You know, it just this list just seems so painstakingly inconsistent in objective of what are they saying, what makes a great album. Because if I'm not understanding what makes one album greater than the next in the context of what they're providing me, what's the point? It's just like I'm reading a random list to get upset and report about, which, yeah, you know, I'm internally rolling my eyes at even saying that, but it's just strange to me. It really is. Black Album, okay. I don't have a lot to say about what's going on here. Ooh, reverse. Fantastic. Pusha T's best album still. I listened to this album today. I listened to it a lot, and it is almost a vignette of what Pusha T's career is at its very best. It shows some of his clips, charisma, and swagger, as much as it shows just his insane penmanship and collaborative genius when working with Kanye. I love this album. I have an issue with them putting Coloring Book over Old Dirty Bastard, Return of the 36 Chambers, because, okay, if we're looking here, just at these 2 tracks in particular, Shimmy Shimmy Ya and Brooklyn Zoo are fantastic, but the album as a whole is so cohesive, and it is just this storytelling piece. And if we're talking vignettes, we got to talk about Old Dirty Bastard, because he's somebody who liked to paint a story on vinyl and in your ears. And Coloring Book had a huge place in my life, and I think in rap music as a whole, in making it more mainstream, accessible, Grammys, hello. But it also marks a moment in hip hop where it's like, we've seen the downfall of this. We've seen what the big day sounds like. And in that regard, does that make this album better? Does it make it worse? To me, it definitely makes me hold a closer magnification to what made it great in the first place. And if anything, it holds higher nostalgia in my heart because of what Chance has failed to deliver to us in terms of quality after this. So that's what I have to say about that. Gotta have that here. Interesting choice. Probably because this was our introduction to Young Thug and Rich Homie Quan, where people were like, who's gonna be bigger? Who's gonna be bigger? You know, people were arguing Rich Homie Quan. I know I've seen a Charlemagne bit where he famously was like, I thought Rich Homie Quan was gonna be the one to make it, but it was Thugger. I would choose a different Young Jeezy album. That's just me. Again, reference point number 1. Carter 2, good, should be higher. Another Clips, or no, we haven't seen them yet. Gotta have Clips. T.I.'s trap music absolutely belongs on here, and I don't think much other T.I. albums do, because he really crossed into pop territory with like Live Your Life and songs like that. Like those were pop hits. Man on the Moon, absolutely. If you don't know how many artists Kid Cudi has inspired with this album in particular, you do not know contemporary hip hop. In fact, there's a story about Kid Cudi talking with Travis Scott, and Travis Scott essentially like crying, saying, you know, Man on the Moon is what helped me become who I am, immensely influential. And, you know, we continue to hear Kid Cudi's melodic, symphonic influence in Kanye's music every time he makes an album. Cypress Hill, self-titled, good choice for Common. There's something else too, where it's like Common is so like the content, like right now people new to hip hop, they're people that, love the Young Boys and the Lil Uzi Verts. I don't think they know and or care who Common is or who Common was and how important albums like this were in hip hop at the times that they came out. But what they are familiar with definitely is Eminem's work. And the Slim Shady LP is, I'd probably put like Curtain Call up here because that was just more me and more what I listened to. But hold on, let me address this atrocity. I think this is a great album. I don't think it's Vince Staples' best album. In fact, I can pick two that are better than it, in my opinion. It's baffling. Like putting it above the Slim Shady EP. I mean, God, Eminem defined a generation of hip hop listeners that would not have been hip hop listeners without him. And think whatever you want to think about why that might be, but just strange, very, very strange. Even though it is a great album, I don't see the influence in it like I see the influence in this. Like, come on. It's just strange to me. Okay, they just picked this because of Paper Planes. I love MIA. She belongs here somewhere. That's hilarious. I like that. Why not Doris or something like that? I know people aren't going to like that, but it's because this album was so different and introspective and innovative in ways that I think people didn't expect from Earl Sweatshirt. And the album cover, I think, is a great marker of that, in that it's just a solid, quick little photo taken, like, oh, that looks cool, a little demonic. That's kind of the mood that this album approaches, of quick ideas, fleeting ideas in and out. But during that, you hear just such, like they say here, I'm not gonna pretend like this isn't in front of me. I featured Prodigy's most poignant lyrics addressing his bouts with depression and alcoholism. And he does so with, I think, charisma and finesse instead of indulging fully in the melancholy of it. He dances around, what the tone might be for the song at hand. And I think he does a fantastic job doing that. Eric B. and Rakim, Azealia Banks, Jay-Z and Kanye, Watch the Throne. Is it a great album? No, it's not. Does it belong on here? Sure. But my question to this is, like, this album today, it is not aged well. That is something I can stand on. I've listened to it plenty of times. It has not aged well. But at the time, this thing was different. And again, there's tiptoeing around different, perspectives to take on. Are we indulging in the nostalgia of the past, or are we reconciling with what sounds good now and what is still influential? And this, to me, is not still influential. Granted, a few songs on it might be. Whoa. Megan Thee Stallion, Fever. It's her best album, in my opinion. And it's just so strange to me to pick an album for Megan Thee Stallion when it's, like, in reality, different than Doja Cat, where it's like Megan Thee Stallion's collections of different singles from different mixtapes and albums have led her to the success that she has right now, instead of pieces of work. I remember listening to this album when it came out, and I really, really, really liked it. I was like, ooh, Megan Thee Stallion's next. 75 on greatest. I just don't see that. I don't really understand it, where it's like, if we're rating the greatest rappers, I could see you putting her at this sort of spot. But yeah, it's just stuff like that is sort of confusing me, because we haven't seen the turn of influence that this has spawned yet, even though I think we're about to see that very, very soon. Fear of Black Planet is a fantastic album. I'm a big Public Enemy fan. Wow. See, yeah, they're showing respect to the classics. Yeah, absolutely. Influential and classic and respected all at once. One of the most legendary album covers of all time. Gotta do it. Again, an album that when you return to it, it is dated, but at the time, this was it. I was 5 years old when this came out, And when I started listening to hip hop music when I was probably like 9, 10, 11, you know, this is something I came into contact with very, very, very fast, this album. Black Star, Gotta Show Love, to the legendary duo. Yes, I love Operation Doomsday, and I think it belongs exactly in the spot. I actually wholeheartedly agree with that. Okay, Damn's good, but it isn't even my top 3 Kendrick albums. I think this album has some misses in terms of singles, and also is something that when you listen to it now, it hasn't aged well. It's not as good as it was when you first listened to it. Whereas if you go back to something like To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City, those albums are as good, in my opinion, as when I first listened to them, if not better in their own regard. I just feel like there was more substance in those albums than there was in this one, where Damn seemed to lay out its themes like a red carpet, you could walk right through it. It seemed that To Pimp a Butterfly and Good Kid, Mad City were purposefully, you know, packaged in, like I've said throughout these small little vignettes at the beginning and ends of songs where it seems arbitrary until it all connects and makes sense. And yes, he won a Pulitzer for this, so sure, put it higher on the list. Wow, very low, very, very low. I absolutely love the Beastie Boys, and this is the album that belongs on here. I love No Name, and I'm happy to see them so high on the list. You know, I think again, this is more about No Name themselves rather than the album, when what the album really did. Even though I think this is a fantastic album and was influential in its own right, her debut tape, Telephone, I think was a little bit more influential. Again, that's just my opinion. This is definitely more packaged in a better album overall. Shout out Midnight Marauders, happy to see that up here. Culture belongs where it is on this list. It was everything it should have been and more. And it's just disappointing to know that Culture 2 and 3 just absolutely dropped the ball. Too low. There we go. I was waiting for this to show up on the list, thankfully. I'm just gonna start nodding my head a little bit more because I'm starting to agree with more of the top hits. Okay, not enough time has passed, man. And if we don't have Igor above this, this was not his best album, in my opinion. I enjoyed Flower Boy a little bit more. That's just me. Classic song. Album, I was not born in the time to say. Yep. Nodding my head. Acid rap, yeah. It's basically what, you know, Kanye's The College Dropout was to the SoundCloud scene, of hearing something that we thought changed everything, changed how we thought about, you know, this introspective rap music. It made it not corny again. And that was sort of a hole that I think hip hop was in for a while, and taking the pretentiousness out of the music. And acid rap did this, I think, better than most could, and deserves this spot. Maybe, but you know, whatever. Doggy Style, I don't have the reference point on this at all. And I'm learning a lot from this list too. I'm seeing things that I haven't recognized, and that's why I don't want to speak on something that I don't know, to avoid sounding ignorant or being ignorant, in that, you know, these people are smart. These people are editorials, they're writers at Rolling Stone. They know what they're talking about, and they have the experience. And so I'm keeping my ears wide open for stuff like this. There we go. Chief Keef, finally rich. Okay, here's Pink Friday. Man, I'm a lot of my complaints from earlier are definitely being answered here. Paul's Boutique. I would put License to Ill in front of it, but I think people like Paul's Boutique a lot more, and it was definitely the more influential one at the time. Should be higher, but okay. Okay, now it's starting to make sense. Now the Eminem rankings and the Nas rankings are starting to make sense. DMX, Interesting choice at number 21, but I think they're trying to again sort of pivot this into the Lil Wayne mixtape era and how big that was at the time. It was everywhere. And now we're getting into the big ones, the top 20. I agree with this. Not only is this Future's best album by a mile, I'm going to emphasize that. Future's best album by a mile, and really set the blueprint for so many people going forward. And for, I think, what Future was trying to return to, and something that I don't see him doing again, where it's like the tonal consistency of just aggravated misogyny on this album. I mean, it was so pinpointed into, you know, Future talking about these illicit subject matters and doing it with such confidence that we hadn't heard before. And obviously, yeah, it's deplorable, but that is essentially the point of this album, Dirty Sprite 2. I mean, just looking, I can't say a lot of the song titles on here because they're all gonna be censored. But I mean, if you haven't listened to this album by now, it's insane. And what they say about here about the deluxe doing it justice, I completely agree. Show love to Lil' Kim, shout out that. Makes me happy, makes me smile. I mean, it's really like, it's one of the most legendary underground hip hop albums ever. And I think it will be for a long time. I'm happy to see Yeezus as high as it is on this list. You know, finally that album's getting the recognition it deserves. Croissant earned. That's clever. I really like that. I mean, yeah, just I think a big thing with this, and knowing the production that went into this and the people that worked on this. Arco was someone who worked heavily on this album. Just the sonic sort of styles that Kanye approached on this were not only unparalleled to what we've heard from him before, but a shockwave to people that were expecting something normal from Kanye. You know, this was sort of the beginning of, I want to say, avant-garde Kanye, in sort of recognizing, like, I'm a rapper, I have this position, and satirizing himself more. I mean, Bound 2 and the music video that goes with it is hilarious and self-aware, you know, and that self-aware nature reached a peak on Yeezus, of Kanye essentially making a parody song about himself, about the lavish lifestyle that he lives. So I appreciate that. This is the pick that I'm talking about when I say that they make controversial picks to get people talking, because in no way, shape, or form does Cardi B's invasion of privacy on a quality spectrum deserve to be where it is on this list. Did it create a new wave in hip hop? Yes, absolutely. And Cardi B is somebody that is not going away for a long time, and she can disappear for a while, come back, and be as big. But when we're talking greatest albums of all time, I just don't see this as being a pinnacle, you know, album. Was it pinnacle for her? Absolutely. And it was huge. And I don't want to discredit anything that Cardi B has done. But, you know, for instance, putting Pink Friday even at 31, even a little bit below it, I think is not paying attention to, you know, I don't think there would be an invasion of privacy without something like a Pink Friday. And I'm not saying that in a way of like, oh, Cardi B wouldn't be here without Nicki Minaj, but, you know, the stylistic stepstones and footsteps that artists can follow in the future, I think is important to recognize. And I mean, Cardi B's invasion of privacy, sure, it belongs on the list. I'm not here to argue whether it does or not, but this high on the list, I think, is the difference. Nodding my head. I put The Chronic higher than 2001, but I mean, the message is a classic. It's not even his best album. It's not even his second best album. It's not even his third best album. I'm done. I'm not going to address that anymore. Absolutely. And, you know, this is an album that belongs in the top 10 because we saw the influence it created, and we saw Lauryn Hill just never return with something like it ever again. In fact, she still performs this album to this day. So shout out Lauryn Hill. The Best Tribe album gets its spot just as Enter the Wu-Tang does, 36 Chambers, and Missy Elliott too. Classic. I like these. Ooh, I love it. This is such a fantastic album. Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. It is the most cinematic hip-hop album I've probably ever listened to. It's great. Makes sense. I saw a lot of speculation about this not even being their second best album or their best album. It's one of my favorites, but number 2, no. I just don't understand, because I think their other projects were far better and more influential, and that's becoming an Achilles heel of mine here, of just something that I just cannot stop falling onto. And number 1, Notorious B.I.G.'s Ready to Die. And this is something like I don't want to overstep. I was not alive when this came out. I was not alive when this was the most popular hip-hop album in the world. But again, it marks something where this was the height of New York hip-hop, and New York hip-hop hasn't been as big as it was, I think, at this point since then. Like, since this point. You know, I think they're trying to sort of explain and emphasize how influential the New York wave is. And I think the history behind this too, and how much, you know, Sean Combs, that's how they address him here, how he was fired, and how this wasn't looking good. And then the album came out and it changed everything. Like, it changed everything, not only for Biggie and for Puff, but for the industry as a whole, where albums were going and where the music was going as a whole. And, you know, I think that's important to recognize and to explain with this stuff. And that's the list. And, you know, there's not a ton else to say that I don't think has already been said, but, you know, this is gonna be a long video, so I hope you enjoyed it, and, you know, like and subscribe for more. I appreciate it. Have a good one.